Well, hello, you beautiful people. This is Gary Horn, and this is the NWA. It's the podcast celebrating the past, present, future, history, legacy, and tradition of one of the greatest pro wrestling entities of all time. Talking about that National Wrestling Alliance, and this is our first live stream on the new YouTube channel. And I'm not alone. Today, I have with me, or tonight, I have with me, Mr. Wil Martin. Wil, thank you so much for joining me.
Man, thank you for having me. And Gary, you're never alone, man.
That is really, really sweet. I I I I've just felt lonely because we're all in quarantine, but I'm glad that you are here to join me in a quarantine stream and we can do this thing together. Well, you've had your own YouTube channel going on, and so we just met yesterday, and
Right.
That's
Right.
that's not true. Wil and I actually know each other, and so Wil got hooked into the NWA. Wil's a longtime wrestling fan, and I guess tell people a little bit about you, because this will go out on the podcast and stuff, and so that people that may not know who Wil Martin is, I've got to go get my glass over here anyway. So you tell them who you are, buddy.
Well, appreciate it. Yeah, I'll just take it from here, Gary. You just take a little break. So yeah, I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. Shameless quick plug for my YouTube channel if you want to go watch an intro video about my history as a wrestling fan, since literally as far back as I can remember, starting with WCW. I kind of just missed the NWA as it phased out into the WCW, so I don't have a lot of history specifically with the NWA, but WCW into the Attitude Era, and the normal lull during ruthless aggression that most of us had, and then just got reinvigorated in about 2015 into wrestling and WWE and recently AEW. But now, and really, Gary, through your inspiration, because I remember when you started This is the NWA podcast, this podcast, I was super happy for you. And I was, at the time, I was really interested in the NWA, but I was about to have a child be born. And so life got very busy directly following that. So, we
Obviously,
got
your
into this,
priorities are out of line, but fair enough.
well, you know, so we got into this quarantine state that we're in now. And I just, you and I have been talking a little bit, and honestly, we've stayed in touch via social media, but we haven't really hung out or talked much in a few years. And we just connected, and I was just like, man, this is the perfect time for me to jump headfirst into the NWA. And as soon as I did, I was I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, because I knew it was going to be good, just because of who owns it and who's running the show and the talent that they have. So I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't realize it was going to hook me in that fast. And so I'm quarantined. I don't have a lot of people to talk to, and I needed a outlet for that. And so I just started recording some videos about my reactions to starting with the first episode of 10 Pounds of Gold. And the video I have up now, the latest one, goes through the first 10 episodes. And so, I mean, guys, this is real time. This isn't something that happened like a year ago. This is like me now. And then you asked me to come on and talk about the first two episodes of Power. I literally just watched them for the first time. So for you, this is like a recap. For me, this is almost like I'm covering a current event. So I'm just excited to be here talking about it. And I think it's going to be fun.
That's awesome, man. It's I'm glad to have you, buddy, and it's been exciting seeing you do what you've done. It's really impressive. The videos are. Robert Stinson's in the chat right now saying, "Man, your reviews are absolutely dope." So, I think you're picking up a little fan base. No, it's really good stuff, and it's cool to see somebody reviewing stuff for the first time. I even saw like Tim Storm like or retweet your tweet, or the tweet I put out about wishing I could see that Aldis and Storm feud again for the first time. And
so good.
Yeah, man. And they've just had this rivalry since the rebirth of the NWA that's just it's still carrying on to this day technically. So I think there's always going to be like a little one-upsmanship between the two of them. And Anyway, so we are going to talk about episode 1 and 2 of NWA Power. We're going to do that because I wanted to get into reviewing them. I don't have any reviews of the episodes up on the This Is the NWA account. So what I thought would be fun, Will and I actually have a project we've been talking about doing, but we'll talk about that another time. But I thought it would be fun to get new people on and discuss the episodes of Power, maybe even bring in some new people like yourself who haven't been watching it. I've got some folks lined up over the next little while that haven't watched any NWA yet, and they're going to just do it just to come on the podcast and talk about what they've seen. So I think that'll be a lot of fun, and that'll give an opportunity to get some reviews up there for in the future when, you know, maybe some evergreen content. So when people come in and want to check out the NWA Power show, they can also watch the reviews. Before I get there, Will, though, I did want to ask you the 10 pounds of gold. That's a big step that a lot of people I'm finding out right now haven't taken. They didn't go back and watch that far. There's a ton of people you'll see on Twitter and everywhere else that have just started with Power. So like that's their first interaction with the NWA since its rebirth and everything. Would you recommend people go back and watch those 10 pounds of gold series? Absolutely,
man. I mean, I think they're vital. And again, I'm just starting this journey, so I'm by no means the expert here, but so for me, I'm a big context person. I like context. And when I watch wrestling, it's the same as when I watch a movie. I love storylines. I like character development, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it definitely made sense for me to go back as far as I could. I even tried to go back further than 10 pounds of gold. And there was just not a lot of information before, you know, Billy Corgan bought the NWA, especially like video and, you know, articles and stuff like that. So really that's kind of as far back as you can go and have some like solid documentation. But I love the character development, and I love to be able to so like perfect example is I actually watched the episode, the first episode of NWA Power live the night it came out, just because I'm a wrestling fan. I knew it was happening. I'm excited. But I watched it again now that I've watched 10 pounds of gold, and it was like amplified like times 1,000. So if you're like me and you enjoy the context and the storylines and the character development, absolutely go watch 10 pounds of gold. Even if you are caught up and you're just going back and doing it as a review, I think it's an incredible resource out there to kind of, you know, just reinstill those characters and that development, because I think it's vital.
Yeah, I love that series, and that's where I actually jumped on the first time. Was with the 10 pounds of gold series. As soon as I heard, I don't want to give away too much about your show. People should go check out your YouTube channel and see those videos, or unless we work something out otherwise to get them over here or something. People need to see them because
I can be bought, Barry. I can be bought.
You can be bought.
You want them on your channel, there's a price.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about that after. The no naughty stuff here.
No, we're good.
So what I was going to say is I jumped on because I was into the Smashing Pumpkins already. Like I love the Smashing Pumpkins. I think you had like kind of a similar story. So as soon as I saw that Billy Corgan bought the NWA, like you mentioned, I love I was watching the videos today and just seeing that like you and I had kind of similar sentiment, like that this merging of like rock and roll and wrestling, and just this idea that Billy Corgan, out of all people, has decided to go buy a company. And I was on day one when I heard about it and started watching the 10 pounds of gold series. And I still, what's what I'm looking for. I still just hold those things in such high regard. And I think they've got their own cool journey and a journey that people, I'm rambling on about this just because I also think people should check it out, because a lot of the characters that you see even now in NWA Power, you might not have the appreciation for that you would have watch if you've seen the 10 pounds of gold series. One of those is Josephus. Yes, and you had a little bit about Josephus. Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, man, I was about to say that. Like, as you were talking, I was just like, man, that, and I mentioned it in my latest video. Just like it took a little while for him to grow on me, but it was like when I first was introduced to him, it was just kind of like, oh, here's a strange guy. He's probably going to be here and then gone. And then the rematch with him and Tim Storm, I was just like blown away. I was like, this is my favorite. He's my favorite, you know. And I latched onto him, and yeah, that was a great part of that story.
It'll give me an excuse to bring back, like I was doing on the podcast when it was just a podcast. I was doing these rewatches then, and I similar idea to what I was just talking about. I would have people come in and watch like the 10 Pounds of Gold series. Like we'd do like several episodes at a time, and I would have them sit down and talk to me. And oh man, the 3% thing gets everybody. It like hooks them in, and him on the Hollywood Walk of Fame or whatever that is, the stars. Oh my God, that hooks people. It was cool to see it hooked you too. And you will see on Twitter, like there is a huge cult following for Josephus. And it's actually kind of, for what you've seen of Power so far, we'll get into, but he hasn't had the best of luck since the NWA Power show has started up. But he was a big deal.
That's a point that I'll make when we get there. Because that was just such a big shift from what I saw in 10 Pounds of Gold to then what I experienced in these first two episodes. So,
okay, well, I guess let's jump into it. I won't dig any further into 10 Pounds of Gold and let you experience that. One of the cool parts, another cool part about your video was that you were talking about all the stuff that you expected to happen and doesn't happen, and it just happens in a different way. That still had the element of surprise for you. Like you didn't know exactly what was coming next. Did you, by the way, have you seen the pay-per-views yet? Like, I mean, as far as Crockett Cup, any of that stuff, the NWA 70th anniversary? Okay.
Nope.
Did you watch All In?
I did. I watched that live when it happened.
Okay. Yeah, so you're building up to All In right now, probably, in where you're at. And yeah, that's some good stuff, man. I miss all of that. And Aldis and Cody, man, they have such good chemistry together. Like that's one I still hold out that we'll get a Aldis and Cody 3 someday.
Ooh, that'd be nice.
All right. So I'm going to jump in and we'll just do a review here. Thanks to the folks in the chat. We do appreciate you. I will try to acknowledge as I can. I did pull up the chat. I popped it out instead of the video so I don't freak myself out. But yeah, Robert Stetson in the chat said rock, wrestling, theater, philosophy, etc. all appeal to the same intellect.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel, Robert Stetson. Thank you for joining us, by the way. And thank you, Jennifer, my wife, for also being there. She has been anxious for me to get back on live recording, I think probably to get rid of me. All right. So we're going to run through the episodes here, episode 1 and 2 of NWA Power. And hey, thanks to the Nation Show for jumping in. Hope your show goes well. I appreciate that, brother. Jordan Huey over at the overtimer.com is where I'm getting the results from NWA Power. Will and I have both rewatched them, or Will for the first time. But I'm going to use his outline of the recap and just kind of read through that to give us a guidance through the shows. And we will start with the show opens on episode 1. We begin with a brief history lesson before David Marquez introduces Aldis and his charge Camille. Marquez says they've gotten to know each other well, been all over the world together, asks what all this means to him. Aldis says an incredibly brilliant man once said, it's so hard to be humble. And now that he's coming up on over 300 days as the real world's champion, it's hard to stay hungry. But he says NWA has grown from a punchline to a headline. He puts over the likes of the Wild Cards, James Storm, Allison Kay, the NWA's other champs. Aldis puts over the roster gunning for his championship, which brings him to Tim Storm. Aldis says he respects him as much as anyone he ever met, but respect is a two-way street. Aldis says that every meal that he's ever put on his son's dinner table comes from pro wrestling, and he hasn't come this far to do the JOB in the ATL. When they're done, you will know why he is the national treasure and the world's heavyweight champion. Wil, first promo right out of the gate on NWA Power, episode number 1, opens up on Mr. Nick Aldis with that 10 pounds of gold, Camille there at his side, David Marquez with the really cool desk, like the backdrop, everything. What were your thoughts?
Well, I mean, who else was going to open it up, right?
That's who it had to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, so, I mean, it was perfect, I thought. I was still, jazzed up from Dockin as the theme song at that point. So I was still,
Into the Fire is, it just gets stuck in your head.
Yeah, so good. It's definitely been stuck in my head the last couple of days. But no, I mean, there was a few things about this that I particularly loved. And particularly I love them because they're different than what I'm used to. And whenever I reference what I'm used to, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But one thing he did that I'm not used to is acknowledging the other champions. To me, that felt like such a really, like a cool, like a realistic, like nod to the company, like, and to the fans, because like we're not stupid. Like, we know who the champions are. And for him to kind of go through the list and acknowledge it, even when he got to James Storm, he said, hey, you don't have to like him, but you got to respect him. He's the champion. To me, that just like, it took it up another notch for me when it comes to believability and just genuineness. The fact that he's going to come out there and he's going to talk about how he's the world's champion and he's got the 10 pounds of gold, but hey, look who else we got. We got these other champions. Like, we're stacked up, like we're legit fed, and so that was really cool to me. Really respectful. I thought that he didn't come out and just hog the limelight in that opening moment. What he said about Tim Storm, I thought was fitting because, you want to put him over, but at the same time, you got a match against him. So you want to have a little bit of competitiveness in there.
One thing I remember thinking, like sitting out there in the crowd, just hearing that, is going into that episode 1. And I got to go to a press conference like right before that. And I got to actually sit with him and Tim Storm and talk to him one-on-one. And, I respect the hell out of Nick Aldis and think he's a perfect world's champion, the real world's champion. And then you meet, especially when I got to meet Tim Storm face to face, it's like, you, as much as you like him, just seeing everything about him from 10 pounds of gold and just on the TV in general, in person, he's exactly that dude. And there's this aura about him. I don't know that he knows how he projects that. Nick Aldis told me in an interview I did with him where like Tim walks into the locker room and the boys sit up straight. Like they start straightening up and they watch how they talk, and everybody respects Tim Storm. And so anyway, my point being is that when watching this Aldis promo and I'm thinking, God, I don't know who I'm going to pull for. Like, this is a tough call. I love both these guys so much. And the hard part is like, you look at Tim Storm and he is the ultimate babyface wrestler. Like, he's doing a thing that nobody else can do right now. I don't think. I mean, I can't think of like many people that could pull this off, that like he's actually that good guy, tough as nails, like just a genuine worker like guy, and people still love him. They don't resent him for it, and they don't think it's BS. They don't kick him to the curb like a Roman Reigns or something like that. They don't, like everybody else they call BS on, but then Tim Storm, it's like this guy's real, and we respect him. But all of that said, not to talk too much, but then Nick Aldis comes out, and I thought he did the perfect thing in that he made it more difficult by saying, look, man, I know who you are. I respect you. It's a two-way street, though. Every meal my family eats is paid for by this business. He's not doing it any other way than just saying, like, I'm the same as you. I bust my tail in the ring, and I have a family to take care of. And so I'm not going to just lay back and let you pin me. And so that was an interesting approach, and not one you get from, I don't know if Aldis is supposed to be the quote unquote heel here, but it makes the whole contest just that much more challenging to know what you want to have happen, because both these guys are so like, you're like, both of them have to win. What do we do?
And that's a point too that that I noticed. I mean, there are definitely, and as we go through these matches, it'll be very clear. There are very clear heels and faces in all this, but there are some very blurry ones, in my opinion, which I love because, again, you know, and I'm going to talk a lot about when I was a kid because that's my connection, that nostalgia factor to wrestling. I mean, that's the deepest connection that I have to it, and so like I can remember that from when I was a kid. Like you know, I didn't know if Cactus Jack was a baby face or a heel. You know, I liked him. I thought it was fun. You know, and he was just crazy. But you didn't really get caught up in good guy versus bad guy. Sometimes you did, but you know, there are guys that like transcend that. I think Nick Aldis is one. I mean, you're right. Tim Storm is absolutely a baby face in that role. Just out of principle because he is who he is and he's just such a genuine guy. But you know, there's guys like Nick Aldis, even Josephus and people like that line's a little blurry, and it's fun because you just get to be a fan of them. You don't have to, like you're saying, you don't really have to pick a side. Like you can just enjoy a great feud and a great match, and no matter what the outcome is, you know it's going to be quality because these guys are, you know, incredible professional athletes.
Well said. Just for anybody just joining us or anybody watching later on, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you hit like down there at the bottom and subscribe if you would. We certainly would appreciate that. And you can see Wil's Twitter handle above his head. My wife is texting me, telling me she thinks I look blurry. I don't know what I'm going to do about that now. So this is our first live stream.
Tell her that's just what you look like, man.
Yeah.
She married you. Yeah.
Come on, Jennifer. Will, next up, we got the Dawsons versus Sal Rinauro and Billy Buck. Dawson's immediately commits with a double suplex, saying Dawson is legal, goes for the cover, but then picks Rinauro up before the cover, hoists him up. Basically, the Dawsons bully around Sal Rinauro and Billy Buck and just kind of demolish them, essentially. And quick win. Dawsons go over. What did you think about anybody you saw in this match?
Well, Sal Rinauro is my favorite wrestler of all time.
Is he? There you go.
I mean, out of the first two episodes, he was, I mean, you know, this is not a disrespectful term because all of this is needed for storytelling and the industry. And in my opinion, a quote unquote jobber is just as important as anyone else because they work and they come in and they entertain the fans. I was thoroughly entertained by Sal Rinauro and also in episode 2, which we'll get to later. But yeah, I mean, you probably weren't expecting that, but I just want to throw some kudos out to him because I just thought he was a great performer, great athlete, great guy. I enjoyed watching him get beat. So yeah, I mean, as far as the rest of the match, I mean, it was interesting when I was watching it. I was like, okay, so this is the first match, you know, the Dawsons, and you know, it was interesting because it was the first match. It definitely didn't steal the show, but I thought it did what it was supposed to. I thought it created the story for the Dawsons. It set them up as who they needed to be. They looked strong. In my mind, it put them in their rightful position so that, you know, moving on, things would be set up. Again, you know, I don't know if I would have booked that as the first match right out of the gate, but you know, that's wrestling. You know, we're fans and we're entertained and we let other people book it.
Yeah, I will say that, you know, this may come as a surprise to you, but Sal was doing this podcast. He was definitely one of the most requested people I would get in my DMs. Like, talk to Sal Rinauro. And I finally did get him, and I talked to that guy for like an hour and a half, and I could have gone longer. I had to like hang up with him because I had like Royce Isaacs in a scheduled thing like right after. And I was like, Sal, I got to go. You have to come back. Man. Like I could have talked to that dude forever. He is amazing. And he's got a cool story too. Just that guy's been wrestling since like 1997, I think.
Wow.
And yeah. And he, you know, he's been through his ups and downs and kind of looks at this as like one of, I think he said, you know, he doesn't want to say it's his last chance, but it could very well be, to make something happen. And the people in the crowd love him. The further along this goes, like you can tell that Sal gets a lot of love from the NWA crowd. And I think with the Dawsons, you make a good point too. Like that, it sets them up as a very old school heel, rough tag team. And so I kind of like that direction. Sal was very proud too, by the way, that he can always say he was in the very first match on NWA Power.
Yeah, that I had that thought actually when I was watching. I was like, man, I mean, nobody can take that away from him.
Yeah, it's true. After the match is over, they get an interview with the Dawsons, and they say this is just a taste of what you're going to get. They own this world. They're here to fight, and they don't care how they win. They're two guys you turn the other way from when you see them in an alley. They're the guys that bullied you for your lunch money when you were a kid. And that's again, that old school, like just nasty heel from the 80s kind of stuff, I kind of dug that. The next thing that you saw though, Wil, I have to pick your brain about this, is one of the great commercials that the NWA produces, featuring Austin Idol's training facility, the Universal Wrestling College. What did you think of this?
Well, I'm starting next week. No, it was sensational, man. I just, all of those commercials, and I mean, we could do a podcast where we just talk about the commercials for an hour, probably. But I mean, they're so creative, they're so funny. They know who they are. I mean, and so I work in marketing, so I'm a professional marketer, and I look at advertisements and content and things like that through a little bit of a different lens. And what makes the NWA's content so spectacular to me is that they're so aware of who they are. Like there's just this deep self-awareness that we are the NWA, and we've got everything from cartoony characters to these cheeseball commercials to like the most badass ass wrestlers on the planet, and they do it all really well. And so these commercials are just part of that. And I just, it was a great break, and it just made you feel like you were watching studio wrestling in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're lucky that Austin Idol's training facility is near us, so maybe we can go get beat up by Austin Idol at some point. That would be a lot of fun.
We're starting our tag team, right? Wonderful. What was it? Wonderful Wil and Gorgeous Gary.
Yeah, that's it. Oh man. Speaking of, that makes me think of what do you think of as far as the show goes thus far? I guess just in general, the announce team, the commentary, like that stuff. Are you digging those guys? Joe Galley, Jim Cornette, I think is on there right now, and David Marquez, doing the interviews at the podium, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then I think there's another guy, Kyle, that was doing one of the backstage segments.
That's right. Kyle Davis.
He had the unfortunate task of getting yelled at by, I think, Kingston. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think Joe Galley is, he doesn't keep it a secret that he's an award-winning broadcaster. So the seeds kind of get planted, and, like this guy's legit, and he's in the news field and kind of knows what he's doing. So that really did give it some legitimacy from the commentary angle. And then of course Cornette, I mean, that's his voice alone takes me back to the early 90s when I was a kid and first started watching wrestling. So yeah, I love the commentary.
Awesome. Next up, David Marquez welcomes out Eli Drake. No, actually, I think it's Joe Galley introduces Eli Drake. And ask anybody on earth, and Atlanta, GA is NWA country. Gets his yes going. And he talks about Nick Aldis, talks about James Storm, and essentially just says, anybody that's got a belt, a gold belt on right now, I'm coming for you. And so what, your first interaction with Eli Drake?
That was so and again, like the emphasis on the championships was so great to me, because like, yeah, duh, like anybody there is going to want to win championships. That's why you're there. And so that really gave it even more legitimacy for me, and kind of for Eli Drake especially, really put him over in my mind.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that I really liked in one of your videos is you talked about it. It kind of threw you off when you were watching 10 Pounds of Gold and Tim Storm defends against Aldis, but then the very next day or something, he's off to like face Josephus, and you're like, man, this is so weird. Like there's a feud going on, but now he's in a different feud, and
Yeah.
you're like, but that actually makes sense. Like it's the world's championship. Like there would be multiple people gunning for this thing at one time. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was
Absolutely.
an
That's why you're
interesting point.
there. That's why you're there. Like any other sport, it's like you want to be the champion, right? Like nobody sets out to finish mid-level. We want to finish, top 50. You want to win. So, I mean, it's just one of those things that, and I make light of it in the video that you're referencing, but like, it did kind of get me scratching my head, because I was like, why would that throw me off? Like, it makes total sense in reality that multiple people would be coming after the most prestigious title in the company.
Now the next thing that happens is Eli Drake jumps in with Caleb Conley, and they have, I'm not going to go into details like everything since we want to get through these, but the match I thought was good, and it kind of was like this nice juxtaposition from like the dominant heel rough tag team demolishing someone, and then you get like a legitimate like wrestling match between two guys. Caleb Conley very light on his feet, like kind of got that aerial kind of style, and Eli Drake like just a technical wrestler. Do you have any thoughts about that matchup? Eli Drake ends up coming out on top on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up perfectly. I mean, my big takeaway was that they can't all be squash matches, and I'm glad they're not. Because you're exactly right. Just that juxtaposition of, we did see kind of a dominant match, and then we saw a match where both guys got in some good offense, and it was competitive, made the outcome a little more, edge of your seat, and kind of, contributed to the whole story arc of the whole episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a really nice showcase for both people. And whereas, we talked about with Sal being the jobber character in his scenario, Caleb obviously didn't get an interview beforehand or anything like that. But so he I think looks as though he would be the jobber character, but actually puts up a fight with Eli Drake. So it's like a competitive matchup. So I think even in the loss, like looks as though like, okay, there may be more to come from this guy. Like he's just getting his footing in the NWA. Which brings me to another thing real quick as we move on. What do you think about the no entrance music and all of that stuff in the NWA Power?
Man, that was a big note for me, and I kept debating whether or not to bring it up here, because being new to the NWA, I'm like, okay, is this like forbidden territory? Is this just something like people love, or is this just something no one's talking about? I mean, for me, man, I love entrance music. I mean, I could make you a mixtape of my favorite entrances of all time. Like, to me, that is a big deal. So to answer your question, it is a little disappointing to me that there is no entrance music, and it kind of left me wondering like what these guys' entrance music would be if they had it. Even like an Eli Drake, like to me, as we mentioned before, I'm a musical guy. You're a musical guy. Like to me, music has that emotional tie, and so it kind of sets the stage for a lot of that stuff. So I definitely noticed it was missing.
I don't think we should have to pull punches on anything. I mean, in my experience, those guys, the folks like Lagana and everyone, they listen and they want to know what people think. I think for them that the lack of interest music is a throwback to some studio wrestling. They were also kind of in the situation of there's only a short way to walk to the ring. So they just like come out from a curtain. They're right in the ring. And So there was a lot weighing in and out of that. From talking to some of them, the wrestlers also felt the same way. So I mean, they'll straight up tell you, like, the first days there, they were like, what is this? Like, how do we not get entrances? And and then a lot of them turn around and say that it's interesting, though, because you know exactly where you stand right when you walk through the curtain.
Yeah, when I was a kid, man, I had all the figures in the wrestling ring, and like 90% of what I did when I was a kid playing with them was the entrances. I had my little jam box, my little boom box. I got Sting here, so this isn't the actual figure, but I repurchased him. But I would have him walking out of the ring. I'd either be humming the music or I'd have it like tape recorded from the TV. So I mean,
man called Sting.
Yeah. I miss it. I mean, but at the same time, like, you're putting out a good product, I can look past stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, this by the way is not like some fully accepted thing. It is a debated, probably still to this day thing. I think people have kind of been beaten into submission over it. They're just like, oh, this is the way it is. But I will say this too, you have this to look forward to. If you're wondering what their entrance music sounds like, at pay-per-views, they do get full entrances. So
Good.
Yeah. So they have entrance music, all of that stuff. The next thing up is we get to see Josephus. Josephus, you see a recap of some Aldous and Storm stuff, but we'll skip past that. Josephus interrupts the commentators as they're about to introduce Tim Storm. Josephus yells for Storm, demands he wants him out there right now. Corny asks if they should take a break and see if they could get him out there. They indeed cut to some interviews with fans putting over the resurgence of the NWA. We come back, and Josephus is still hollering to get Storm out here. Where is Storm? He keeps calling for it, and then James Storm emerges. And that is clearly not who Josephus was looking for, but
James... Gotta be more specific, man.
That's true.
I mean, you get what you ask for.
And James is, I gotta say, James is pretty harsh on Josephus here. Like, James Storm says some stuff like that, he's a pretend tough guy, and guys like him can never walk a mile in his shoes. And he says he should go back to his desk job and quit trying to play a star. Leave this to the real stars. He says Josephus is nothing but a joke. And this causes a brawl to break out. The referees have to separate them. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty harsh. And, as a follower of the Brittany path with Josephus, I felt personal hurt from James Storm because of these remarks. So.
Yeah, and as a person who's come to love James Storm, or I'm sorry, Josephus, do you have familiarity with James Storm, by the way?
I don't. Same boat with a lot of these guys, man. I mean, if they didn't have any kind of substantial run on the USA Network in the last 4 years, I'm probably not super familiar with them. So, it's a negative and a positive, because I'm kind of meeting these guys with everyone else as this kind of unfolds. But from just looking at him, obviously I can tell he's a tough dude. He's got great promo skills. I mean, when he's on the mic, you fear. I mean, this is a guy to be feared. He's a tough guy. So, yeah, I thought it was great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, James Storm, obviously a guy who's had some history in Impact, TNA, as a world champion there at one point and that sort of thing. He was hot for a little while, but then kind of whatever happened. And I think he was one of those guys that seemed like he might bring TNA up to that next level. And then it just never happened. I was happy to see him in the NWA, though. Obviously, he's got some issues with Nick Aldis. We'll get to that, though, eventually. Next up, the match was the Wild Cards versus Danny White and Mims. We got another heel tag team making their presence known here, essentially. Royce Isaacs and Tom Latimer taking it to Danny White and Mims. Not much of a fight in this one.
Yeah.
Tom hits that huge power bomb, and Royce hits the German suplex. I think it's like the full Nelson into the German suplex. Did he do that one here? I can't remember. I think that was it. But yeah, man, what did you think about these guys?
It was great. I really appreciate it. I think it was Cornette that kind of went through the history of how these guys became tag champs. So that was really helpful to me as a first-time viewer. Thought that was a nice touch, just knowing your audience and knowing that they probably didn't have the context for these guys. But yeah, I mean, the one takeaway for me was like, man, those belts are shiny. Like they are shiny gold. Like they're like a different kind of, I don't know what kind of gold those belts are, but like, damn, it's shiny, you know?
Dude, they're not only shiny, but they're heavy. They're
Really?
super heavy. I was lucky enough to, like, at one of the meet and greets at the show, like got to hold the tag belts, and they are no joke, man. You talk about the 10 pounds of gold. I swear these things have to be like 15 or 20 or something. Like they are super heavy belts. They're a lot. I don't know what it is.
I believe it. There's like a look about them when I first like, and I kind of saw it when they came out, but I think in that first promo post match was when I really got a good look at them, and I was like, man, like those look legit, you know?
Yeah. And you're right. It was good of Corny to talk about the wild cards in this segment, just because the people might not have the history. I'm a big fan of the wild cards. I love those guys. But I could tell that story another day. Just those guys were some of the first people I met from the NWA, and then they were really, really cool, which probably cuts against their character, I guess. I shouldn't say that, but Latimer's just a beast, and Royce Isaacs is young and just got a good build and super athletic. Like I just think they're top-notch tag team. Marquez interviews them afterwards, says the world is eyeing both of them and want those belts just as much. Latimer interrupts, saying no one cares what he has to say. They're tag team champions of the world. Isaacs calls themselves thoroughbreds. Eddie Kingston comes out, and he says he's sorry to interrupt. No disrespect to Bram. Sorry, Tommy Boy. He says the wild cards are holding the top tag titles in the world today. They chirp about this, and Kingston demands they let him speak before they get slapped. Says in this world, it means nothing to him because they don't speak for guys like him. They don't speak for the stray dogs, the underdogs. They don't speak for the outlaws. Wild cards are pissed about this, shove the podium away. Homicide emerges to back up Kingston. Meanwhile, in the back, Storm and Josephus are still fighting.
Here they come.
Tumble out. And they're out there. And they end up like pushing for a match. And I guess this causes the wild cards and Kingston and Homicide to break up. But thoughts on this whole segment?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great for a couple of reasons. Kingston, I mean, he is the perfect like New York attitude / humor for me. I thought it was really entertaining what he said. I mean, I love that they like kind of almost got into a brawl but didn't really, and then suddenly like here's Josephus and James Storm again. I thought that was a really cool way to make that transition. So there was a lot of storytelling going on really rapidly, but it's still all tied together, and I didn't have like whiplash, you know what I mean? It was interesting because if that had happened like somewhere else or with some other storylines that I've seen before, like it would have been like, wait, what is happening? But that was almost like, oh yeah, these guys are still fighting. Like, of course, you know.
That's awesome. It leads right into James Storm versus Josephus. I guess it's an okay thing to just throw that in right here because Josephus tries to charge at James, and when Josephus rushes in, James Storm just kicks him in the face, and that's the end of the matchup.
Yeah.
Poor Josephus. A long way to fall for that guy.
Yeah, and that was my thought exactly, man. I mean, we alluded to it earlier, but like as soon as I saw that and I kind of felt it coming, I was like, wait a minute, like this isn't like he's got a haircut, he's trimmed his beard, and now he's like one super kick's taking him out. you know, what did I miss? Like now I got to fill in the gaps somewhere. But yeah, it was definitely, I was a little disappointed in that, you could say.
Well, as far as the hair goes, you're on the right path. You're going to find out exactly why his hair is shorter and stuff like that. But
Okay.
Josephus he stays pretty relevant for a long time up until apparently the first episode of NWA Power. But it's sad to see James Storm be able to take him out so easy. And not only that, but then just continues to beats the hell out of him basically for a little bit after, puts his thumb in his mouth, and Joseph's just a big old baby.
I did think that was funny. I mean, as big of a Josephus fan as I am at this point, I thought that was hilarious. And really only he could pull that off in that moment. Like that was perfect. But hey, I'm gonna let you set up this next part. I'm gonna take a bathroom break and I'll be right back.
Well, I could also use this time, feel free, Will, sorry, to welcome Turbo into the chat. Thank you so much, Turbo, for joining us. Honestly, this is, again, I've been doing this a lot lately with this stuff, and this is probably not professionally how you do it, like me fixing my hair right now on the live stream. But feels good to be back live. Honestly, I'm glad to see Mr. Stinson, Turbo. Jennifer was in here, may still be, and Natalia Martin was in here as well. She was talking about that's Will's lovely wife. So it's good to have people back. The Nation show, I should shout out. They had stopped through, and this is cool, man. I'm happy to be doing this again. It's not under perfect circumstances. I don't know everything about live streaming and how to do it, but hopefully this looks okay for right now. And as we do, we will continue to learn and get better as we go along. So for those of you just joining us, if you're watching this later or whatever, we are doing the quarantine stream. And part of that process is I want to review and redo all of the NWA Power episodes. I want to just, let's binge them, man. We got nothing else going on. Let's binge watch NWA Power. And so that's what we're doing. And Wil Martin is here. If you don't already know Will, it's it's Will on all the social medias, probably.
With
at least
one
Twitter.
L. One L.
One L. That's a good point. You do spell your name real weird.
I haven't checked out if there's a Hey It's Will with two L's or not, or what they're about. But yeah, just stick with me.
Despite what my wife said, Mr. Stinson in the chat says that it looks great on his end. So sorry, Jennifer. Maybe it was just blurry for you. Anyway, so we're reviewing NWA Power episodes 1 and 2 tonight. We're just marching our way through, just hanging out in the quarantine with you folks. If you want to join us, we're happy to have you, and we're going to keep doing this thing. I think Mr. Stinson's going to join me on one of these episodes later on, talking about an NWA Power episode. All right, and so the next thing up is we get an interview with Tim Storm. He says he never even dreamed he'd be NWA's world heavyweight champion. To say that he deserves to be on the list of the greatest names of all time, he just can't believe that's true. It's humbling. People will say because of his age he shouldn't be doing this. He says he hopes he's 70 and still wrestling. It's a beautiful view from the mountaintop. He never wants to come down. Tim Storm, I mean, we've said a lot of stuff about Tim Storm. They show a recap about him losing to Aldis to lose that NWA title. And then I'm sorry, I should have specified that interview was a past interview because Joe welcomes Tim Storm to ringside to interview him. And they kind of established that if Tim Storm can't win the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship here, he's made an agreement in the stipulation. This is his last time that's going to do this. This is a stipulation that another bigger company will use later too. But I mean, I'm sure that this is not the first time that stipulation has happened, but he says that what defined pro wrestling for him growing up was NWA from Georgia. What defines him as a man is completely different than what defines him as a pro wrestler. He's got a 94-year-old mom that he couldn't even tell he was going to be here today. Says she wouldn't ask if he lost, but she always just asked if he got hurt. And says he'll always be Mama Storm's baby boy. And Mama Storm chants break out. And Wil, you'll be happy to know, continue to break out to this day. But
good.
Storm calls Aldis one of the best champions of all time, says he didn't have to give him this chance, says it was not an easy decision, but he has to do it because there is nothing in the world more important to him than that NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. He quotes a great philosopher who says, if you had one chance, one opportunity to have everything you ever wanted, would you do it or would you just let it slip away? He said, the truth is this, under those circumstances, he can't lose. There's nothing more important than that NWA title. Are you feeling at this point? Are you feeling that Tim Storm promo?
Absolutely, man. And you know, with my recent experience going through the 10 pounds of gold, I mean, you know, I feel such a connection to the guy, and I don't feel, you know, contrary to the people that lived it while it was happening in 2017, I don't feel that far removed. I mean, I feel like, to me, he lost the title last weekend, you know? So, I mean, this is to me, it felt like just an immediate continuation. So I was definitely still bought into him and felt that attachment to him. This promo right in line with, you know, what was conveyed to me through 10 pounds of gold, just this genuine, authentic family man, who just happens to be an incredible pro wrestler in his 50s. You know, it still amazes me. And when we get into the match, I'll talk more about that. But yeah, I mean, the promo, it was the perfect pro wrestling promo for me about a guy who was challenging for a championship. I was convinced that was his greatest wrestling accomplishment. I mean, I bought it. I mean, it was real.
Well, and we could jump right into the match. I mean, it's the very next thing. Nick Aldis with Camille defending against Tim Storm. And one thing, if you look at the thumbnail, I'll probably post for this video is I went back and slowed the video down just so I could pause it and try to get a perfect shot of the beginning of this match, because I just wanted that for the thumbnail, because no two guys, like, I don't care if you've never seen the NWA before. Like, I don't care if you don't have any idea what the 10 pounds of gold is or who Ric Flair is or any of that stuff. Like, the way they look at and treat this championship, I mean, it is the most important thing on earth. And I just, the picture I got is, you know, Aldis walks in the ring, and it was like I was trying to gauge it from all of these things. Like, Aldis walks in the ring, he takes the belt off, and he just stares at it for a minute, and he kisses it. He puts it down on the turnbuckle while he takes off his jacket, just holds it delicately, and like walks it back over to the referee, and the referee comes to take it from it, and he kisses it one more time. Like, maybe this is the last time I'm going to see you. And he hands it to the ref, and the ref holds it up, and everybody is staring up at that belt when he holds it up. And it may not mean anything to some people, but to me, I was watching it. Tim Storm's eyes are locked on that belt. This is the picture I got. His eyes are locked. Nick Aldis is staring up. Camille at ringside is staring up at that belt. There are people in the crowd taking photos and staring up at that belt. It's just like, this is the pinnacle. When's the last time you felt like a WWE championship was that?
Never, man. And that's what, you know, as I go through the 10 pounds of gold, that's like the thought that keeps elevating more and more every episode in my mind, is like, I've never seen, you know, I've been a lifelong wrestling fan, and I've never held a title in such high esteem as I do now, because of the way they treat it and the way they book it. I mean, it's prestigious. It is the mountaintop, and everyone treats it that way. Not just the person that has it, the person that's going after it, even the people, as you mentioned, in the crowd. I know you were sitting in the crowd. Like, if I was there, I would have been eyes locked on it too, man, because it's like, it's something to behold because of the way that they frame it to us as fans, and the way that every wrestler in the company looks at it and talks. It had been talked about throughout the night, not just by Tim Storm and Nick Aldis. It had been talked about by like 4 or 5 other guys. So you knew it was something to be valued.
Yeah, I mean, it is that whole perception is reality thing, or I don't know. It's well, and it's not even just the perception of it too, because I mean, you mentioned this and throwing it back to the history of the thing. I mean, this is a belt that can be traced all the way back to Lou Thez. This could be, this is 1948, the establishment of the NWA. Like this is that championship, at least its lineage. I mean, it goes back forever. I mean, the actual belt itself goes all the way back to like Harley Race. And it's crazy that this is wrestling started in this lineage of a championship, and they treat it that way, and they acknowledge that history, the good and the bad, by the way, because I noticed in one of your videos, again, you talk a little bit about that ECW situation with Shane Douglas and that sort of thing. I mean, it's like the disrespect that was shown to it at that point. It was a heel move because that would work, because the NWA title is supposed to be important. And so it's interesting, like, and it's really cool of Lagana and Billy and those guys to not shy away from covering that. They feature Shane Douglas's image, like they say, like, we this happened. This was a part of the history with this title. And I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of weight that comes with that. I will say I should do this. I had this. I was going to do another video about it later, but Mr. Stinson, who's in the chat, a beautiful man. I don't know if he is still watching. Yeah, I guess he is still out there. He says, reverence. Everyone has a reverence for this title. On the panel that Aldis was on last weekend, this was like they did a Zoom interview with like a Comic-Con he was supposed to be at in England. He said the moderator, DDP and Eric Bischoff were also on the panel. He said the moderator, with DDP shaking his head in agreement, said, it is the most important title. And he says it feels like everything Aldis does is important because he makes it important. And Mr. Stinson, I am blessed to say, this is as good a time as any to say that he sent me this in the mail the other day. It's an issue from 1982 of The Wrestler with Ric Flair and Tommy Rich right there on the front cover. Wow. And Ric Flair wearing the 10 pounds of gold. And he said he's sending it to me with a mission to complete it because Tommy Rich still signs autographs. And so it's my mission to find him and make him sign the other side of that magazine. That was supposed to be the feud of the decade at the time, was Wildfire Tommy Rich versus the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Stinson for that. Going back to the show, though, we get an awesome match between Tim Storm and Nick Aldis. Very, very good. I enjoyed it. I did not know what to expect. I remember being there live. I am shocked and awed by everything that goes on in that ring because I just don't know what to want, what to think, and what the outcome is going to be. And that's good booking, right? Like that's what you want. I don't know, but unfortunately for Tim Storm, Nick Aldis does come out on top. Storm ducks a clothesline. Aldis accidentally wipes out Camille, which was a nice bump from Camille. Storm clobbers him, throws him into the ring, wants a suplex, but Aldis counters with an inside cradle, and that is that. So that's a brief recap of that match. Will, how'd you feel, Nick Aldis retaining?
So this was the first match between the two that I saw in its entirety, because I had seen highlights in 10 Pounds of Gold. I had never yet gone back and watched, one of the entire matches. So Oh man, it was so great. I mean, the key points for me early on in the match, Tim Storm delivered a chop that literally sent Nick Aldis to the opposite turnbuckle from one corner to the other.
Right.
I felt that in my soul, like, because I already hold Tim Storm in this high regard as like this beast. And I think Cornette kept saying it, but like a tank of a man. I mean, that was the perfect way to describe it. And then just the subtlety too, him comparing him to a tank, and he was wearing military green tights. And I feel like when he was champion, he always wore white or pink or purple or bright colors. And so it's just like, it was that attention to detail for me that kind of enhanced the story, because everything matters, even the color of your tights and your boots and stuff like that. So,
That's a really good point, man.
The match itself was, I thought it was great. I mean, when Camille took that bump, I don't know if it was the camera angle, but it looked like she was really close to those metal stairs, and I kind of tensed up a little bit, but luckily she was fine. But I mean, the finish, I mean, I don't know how I would have booked it any differently. I think it played out in the best way it could to be the premier main event for NWA Power. It wasn't by any means definitive in my mind, where it was like, it was the stamp at the end of a feud. I could see it definitely happened again. And again, you guys have more context than me because you've seen further into the story, but just from me looking in at this point, I love the figure four that happened during the match.
Oh yeah, good point.
Anytime I see a figure four, obviously that's going to take me back to Ric Flair and those days. And so, I mean, the match as a whole, and I mean, then, like, I don't know if you remember the series. I think it may have been close to the end or middle end or something like that. But I mean, Tim Storm did like 4 top rope spots back to back to back. I mean, there was a superplex, and just the superplex, I was like, dude, are you kidding? Like, Tim Storm superplex top rope. But then he like goes right back up to the top rope and does a flying crossbody. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's killing it. And then he goes up and attempts a swanton from the top rope. And at this point, like, my mind is blown. I'm like, this is a man in his 50s performing at a high level for a world's championship, doing top rope spots like 4 in a row, 3 or 4 in a row. And I mean, the tide of the match kind of turned right after that, but I felt like even that was just enough to solidify Tim Storm in my mind. Like you said, if this is the last time he ever competes for this title, he was absolutely a worthy opponent. It was not a lopsided match. I mean, he left it all out there, and I was thoroughly impressed with that.
Yeah, Tim Storm is every bit the man that he seems like, and I can't say it enough times just how good of a dude he is. Just even meeting him finally, like, he just is that genuine. Like, just, you can tell that there's nothing fake about him, which brings us to the next point. When all this leaves, Storm slowly stands up, an NWA chant starts from the crowd, and and that's worth saying too. I did want to bring this up. The crowd being so packed in and like right there on top of the action. Dude, the crowd wants this to succeed as much as anybody. Like, they are there to support, to hate, to whatever. And I will, as we go along, you'll see some things happen with Corny, but I'll give him credit where it's due, that he would come out there at the beginning of those things during that taping and say, look, if you're watching Jimmy Kimmel, if he tells a joke and the audience doesn't laugh, it's not funny for the folks at home either. He's like, you guys are as important as anything else in this show. If something sucks, tell us it sucks. If you love something, make sure we know you love it. Yeah. Like, you cannot be quiet. You need to express yourselves as loudly as possible. And it's something I've taken into my mind, that like, that's important to say. Like, that's he makes you know, like, he's like, you guys, like, the camera is shining right there on you. So you can't be bored. You have to be excited. So if something's not making you excited, you got to tell us so that we can fix it. And that's always been a cool thing. But anyway, another aspect of being that close to it is when Camille took that shot from Nick Aldis. I thought she was dead.
Yeah,
like I thought she, and I think I tweeted that to her. She was just like, another day on the job or something. I was like, man, though, he like nailed her, and she just bumped on that mat down there at the side of the ring, and it sounded terrible. I was like, good God. Anyway, that's still in my head is a visual I will never lose, is like her taking that shot at ringside. Turbo's asking in the chat, is the crowd louder live than on the videos? In my experience, I feel like, yes, you can hear the crowd. Like, you can literally hear everything the crowd does when you're there in the studio. So some things they don't acknowledge. And I'm pretty obnoxious during the show too, because I will yell things. And I think they choose what they want to get through.
I will say, Gary, it was very distracting once I figured out where you were sitting, because then I was just watching you the whole time. I mean,
well, that's called star power, Will. That's called star power.
It's called beard power, man. I was like looking at that beard. I was like doing some comparisons. I was like, man.
That's very sweet of you. My wife does that too. She's like, where are we at? We're over here. And I'm like, yeah, we were there. But anyway, so to finally get through episode 1, Will, because I don't know if you've got other plans, but we're working our way through this thing. Storm stays in the ring. Aldis goes over to the interview area. Joe says emotions are running high. It's bittersweet. And Nick Aldis says the NWA stands for National Wrestling Alliance, but it also stands for never without authenticity. And that's where I was going originally with the Tim Storm thing, because all of him and everything about him is authentic. Nick Aldis is pretty authentic. Like, even the confidence that he has, you get it in person. Like, he just is that guy. And he's willing to say Tim Storm's as authentic as they come. He's a hell of a man. Joe turns his attention to Camille and says, how you feeling after that clothesline? And Aldis steps in between them and says, she's fine. And Joe keeps trying to like move to Camille, and Aldis steps in front of him. It's like, don't take away from this moment. Don't take it away from Tim Storm. Save your clickbait stuff for another day. How about that? And that's kind of how the show ends. Feelings there, Will?
Joe. I mean, come on with that clickbait stuff, man. Like, you're an Emmy Award winning broadcaster, and you let us know it, and you're coming out with clickbait. Come on, No, I thought it was interesting because this was one of the aspects that I neither loved nor hated, because on the one hand, like I'm waiting to see where this goes, and we do get into it a lot in episode 2. And I'm sure, and I have the trust that, this is part of a storyline, and it's going somewhere. They wouldn't end the episode with that and then have it carry over to episode 2. But it did feel like a little bit of a rough pivot from the incredible match we just saw, potentially Tim Storm's last time, going after the 10 pounds of gold. And that's kind of what we're gonna leave with. And I was glad that Nick did take it and say, hey, let's not take this moment away from Tim. And it did, that conversation happened, but it did end with, Tim Storm looking at Nick Aldis from the ring, basically saying thank you. And then Nick Aldis looking at him with obvious, respect in his eyes. And so, that was a great way to end it. But yeah, the clickbait stuff, I don't know. We'll get into it in episode 2, but.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're still good to move on to episode 2, Will?
Absolutely. Let's do it, man.
All right, buddy. Before we get there, I just want to acknowledge in the chat, thanks to everybody who's there. There is a conversation going about the loud crowd in the studio. Robert Stinson saying a lot of editing that has to go because inevitably people shout out inappropriate remarks. It's super entertaining live, but we have been warned about our remarks. And that definitely does happen. And some people say some really, there's every once in a while, I'll give the crowd credit that every once in a while there's somebody who says something that's just like inappropriate, or like you're like, this is not gonna be any good. And I'll use a PG example. Colt Cabana's in the ring and somebody tries to start a CM Punk chant or something. The crowd generally like jumps right on that. They're just like, boo, shut up. Everybody just starts telling them to shut up. Like the crowd's like in it to be excited. I was telling somebody the other day that it's a totally different product, but it reminds me so much of like the feeling of watching early ECW too, in a way that like the energy that people are just invested in what is happening in that ring. Like they are just crazy about these people fighting and they want them, to compete and want to see what happens. And they're just really supportive. Anyway, that would be, it's a weird thing because obviously nobody's crashing through a burning table or anything, but all right, let's move on to episode number 2. I just saw Robert Stinson say, I'll never forget the speech chants after Camille speared Allison Kay. That's a spoiler, Robert Stinson.
Come on, man.
Will's only like 2 episodes in. All right, so let's move into episode number 2. We start off with a recap of the last week. Nick Aldis defeating Tim Storm, Camille being wiped out, Aldis refusing to have her be able to comment on anything. And Marquez introduces a new person to us. It's Aaron Stevens, formerly Damian Sandow from WWE. Marquez says he hasn't been in the square circle in some time. Stevens introduces himself and says that in the past few years, he's had a lot of success in film, television, theater, and he gets a lot of boos. People are not into Aaron Stevens, but he says he heard the NWA was back and professional wrestling is back. So he's here to announce that he too is back. Stevens says he's broadened his horizons as a performer. He doesn't want anyone to take this personally. It's just for him to be able to perform his best. This goes from Marquez, the commentators, referees, wrestlers, and all the fans here. Don't make eye contact with him. He gets a lot of responses. He says, don't laugh. He's not there for comedy. He doesn't do that anymore. He's a serious thespian. Thank you. When asked who he will be facing, he refers to the opponent as his supporting cast. And clearly, judging by the reactions, he's the star. So when he needs a supporting cast member, he'll let them know. Walks away saying, they like me. They really like me. Will, thoughts on Aaron Stevens?
Oh man, I thought it was great. Personally, I loved this iteration of his character, and he's like, I've had a lot of success in film and theater, and I was just thinking, has he? I didn't know if he was being serious or not. And then he said, I think he said mainly out west, which I think at that moment I knew, okay, he's a heel. Like he's in Atlanta, GA, and he's talking about being a star out west. Obviously, he's a heel. But yeah, I thought the no eye contact thing was hilarious. And then just how Marquez acted after that, genuinely trying not to look at him. Like I try to think of myself in that position and how hard that would be to pull that off and not like die of laughter. But we were just talking about the crowd interaction. This was the one time that I heard a comment from the crowd when Aaron turned and said, "I'm not finished," and a guy said, "That's what she said." that was like the one time that it was crystal clear that someone in the crowd was saying something and the room felt really small. But yeah, Aaron Stevens, I again, I have no context for where this is going as you guys do that have watched it, but I thought this was a decent way to introduce him to us.
Will, am I being long-winded? My wife just a hashtag Jennifer note I just got was don't be long-winded.
No, you're not, man. You're good. This is a
Thanks.
conversation. This is how it goes.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, Jennifer likes to chime in. She won't show up on the show. She won't like do anything. She'll just send me text messages every once in a while to tell me what she thinks about how the show's going.
My wife sent a couple of emojis in the chat earlier. I don't know if she's still with us, but that's good.
I mentioned her. I gave her a shout out when you had to go to the bathroom.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Nice. So we're happy to have her drop in. I hope to see her someday once we're able to see people again.
When we're a tag team, we're gonna need some valets, some managers, so we'll get them in there.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Hey, Will, next up on episode number 2, I'm going to try not to spoil anything by telling you that these are 2 of my favorite performers in the NWA currently, but you get a match between Trevor Murdoch and Ricky Starks, just like right into it. And yeah, it's a good matchup, just like a brawl. And Trevor's very rough. Trevor's probably familiar to some WWE/F fans. Ricky Starks is a newcomer, and Trevor tries to go for a lariat, but Starks counters with a crucifix, rolls him up for the pin, and gets the win. And Murdoch immediately does stand up, by the way, and shake his hand, saying, "Good job, kid. Wasn't my night." Before we get to the Starks interview, what were you thinking during this?
Yeah, I mean the beginning, I think they showed a wide shot of the 2 of them standing in their corners, and it was a little off-putting, the size and the age difference. Just looking at them from that initial wide shot, they made up for it, in my opinion, in the match. So I mean, I thought it was great. I thought the ending was great. The crucifix, I feel like I haven't seen that in a long time. I don't know if you have, but that just I've seen it, but it's usually been a 2 count kick out. It hasn't been.
Yeah,
like
same.
So I thought that was a really nice touch, just reminding us like, hey, these things can finish matches too. Like it's not just finishers that finish matches. So I thought that was cool. I definitely thought it was classy. Murdoch coming over and telling him, hey, I just want my night. Congratulations, kid. And yeah, then take us into this incredible Ricky Starks promo.
Yeah, Starks gets interviewed, and he says he's got a lot of goals. He could go for the world's title, national title. But Ricky's all about taking this to another level. He says men call him absolute Ricky Starks. Women call him Stroke Daddy. Stark says everyone watching knows that everybody finds him really sexy. He knows Marquez wants to look like him, but he won't hold that against him. He doesn't, because God didn't have any beauty left over after he made him. So you can't blame anyone for looking how they do. Ricky's got love for you anyway. So yeah, Ricky Stark's very flamboyant. Did I miss a line that caught your attention or anything there?
Well, the closing line where he said, something to the effect of, I may look funny, but at the end of the day.
Oh, God. Yeah. Why didn't this guy put that in the outline? Yeah. Sorry. I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. You may look funny, but at the end of the day, I'm counting your money. I'm going to use that in like business meetings and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll go over well. Ricky Starks has got swag, son. And as you go forward in the 10 pounds of gold series, he makes his actual debut. The first time he wrestles for the NWA is at NWA 70, and they play like a really, really cool video for him. Ricky Starks got the attention of David Legata and Billy Corrigan and Nick Aldis, all of those guys, because he was out there hustling, man. He was doing his thing, like wrestling. He was, I think one of his best friends that he wrestles with was Sammy Guevara, who is currently at AEW, MJF, Lakitos, all of those guys. And he was making it and funding his own videos. So you just Google Ricky Starks or look him up on YouTube. And there's plenty of videos that Ricky Starks made of himself with the 1-800-STARK slide and all of that stuff. Like, Ricky Starks is legit. And the NWA, you'll come to know, values those that have that hustle behind them. Like, that's what they're looking for, because they know the NWA is the scrappy underdog. They have to have people that are going to bust their tail to get to the top. That's what they want. That's who they're looking for. Ricky Starks is definitely one of those guys. So I want to welcome to the chat, by the way, Andrew McKinney is in the chat. Natalia Martin is in the chat, communicating.
Hey, there she is.
Yeah, she's there. And so, hey, what other wrestling podcast has this many women bouncing around in the chat? I don't
Zero, my friend.
Zero. Ladies don't show up in other wrestling chats. Andrew McKinney says, Will, by the way, you should use as many wrestling quotes as possible in business meetings. So it's worked for The Rock, apparently. That guy's doing okay. We just watched Jumanji 2 the other night.
Hey.
Quarantine. Yeah, it's great. Danny DeVito took over his body. It's quite the sight to see. Galley introduces Joe Galley brings up his tips to interview Camille last week. Galley takes offense to his questions being called clickbait. He says sometimes you need to ask tough questions. The viewers deserve answers. So he's asked for the opportunity to sit down with Nick Aldis and Camille to continue pushing those questions as fair and balanced broadcast journalist. He then introduces Colt Cabana. And Colt Cabana is very exciting. He walks out and literally says, like, this is exciting. And I've heard him in multiple interviews say, like, that was legit. Like, he said that was the first thing he thought of to say, because he walked out and, like, the energy from the crowd when he walked out, he was just like, oh my God, like, what's happening here?
I believe it, man. It felt really genuine. I mean, I smiled. I was just like, you're right. This is exciting. This is great.
Galley talks about the elephant in the room, James Storm. Cabana acknowledges that Storm, well, spoiler alert, Will, Storm took the national championship from him, and he took the worst pass while he took it while he was down. But look at him now. He says he's here for the championships, whether it's the national championship, the world championship, or the tag team championships, as after all, he is doing tag matches now. People say he doesn't got a guy, but he does got a guy, and his name is Mr. Anderson. And and Mr. Anderson walks out, says he could have picked anybody in the world to be his partner, but he picked this asshole. Says we can be like everyone else and talk about how big we are and how bad we are, but at the end of the day, they know. He welcomes the world to the team of Mr. Cabana and Mr. Anderson, the repeats of the last names. And I think Cabana actually, like, I think Mr. Cabana happened and Anderson said it, and then he said Mr. Anderson, and then Colt said Cabana.
Yeah, it was really awkward.
Yeah. He seemed lost. I will say, I think, I mean, from everybody I talked to, they say it's legit. You walk out there, they tell you, which is something that's been missing from wrestling again, but they say, like, these are the points you got to get across. Have at it. Like, they just trust you to get there. They say they don't even limit you on the time. They're just like, don't be ridiculous. Go out there and do what you got to do. What did you think about Colt Cabana and Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, man. I mean, just like you said, I mean, I could tell that was his genuine reaction, and you telling me that just now, I hadn't heard that about there not being these scripting limitations on them, but now that I know that, looking back on what I've seen so far, like, it's obvious. I mean, these guys, they're allowed to go out there and be themselves. Obviously, it's pre-recorded. They can edit it if they want to. I did notice specifically in that one, there was an edit, so you know better what happened during that part. I think it was right after the asshole line, and it kind of cut, and Ken Anderson had a completely different facial expression. So I was like, I wonder what happened there. That's
I don't even remember. I imagine it was probably leaked. It was probably just like the amount of time they went. They were like, let's trim this down a little bit.
could have been a crowd. Maybe the crowd reacted for a long time, and they just had to cut that out for some reason. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was really funny. I loved. I kind of laughed when Colt Cabana's like, I got a guy. Yeah, it's just like his character when he was doing that, because I haven't really been exposed that much to him as a primarily WWE fan for over the years. So I've heard of him a lot in relation, obviously, to CM Punk, but this is kind of the first real exposure I've had to him. So I appreciated his character. I appreciated just his demeanor and his humorous take on that promo. I thought was interesting.
Yeah. The thing is I forget who said this, and I think it might have been Lagana when I was talking to him one time. And I feel like I'm like name dropping, and I'm not trying to. I'm just saying, like, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was him who said sometimes the NWA is like the island of misfit toys. It just, the thing is like you could try to go out there and you could try to, you're obviously not going to have the big budget stuff like the WWE. You can't put on the production value that they put on. And the best wrestling in the world, that's tough to do too, because they get bought up by either WWE to put them in NXT or somewhere, or now AEW or New Japan and that sort of thing. Like, again, NWA is the scrappy underdog. What can you go off of? And it's these characters. It's these people that can get themselves over by talking to you, like trying to relate on the microphone. And they can go in there and they can put on a match, and some of them are really good. Some of them are people that were overlooked, that sort of thing. But a lot of them are going to be these people like Colt Cabana, which Colt Cabana is very good. So that's, again, I'm not knocking anybody here, but it's just random seeing like a guy like Mr. Anderson walk out. You remember from WWE as Mr. Kennedy, and you've kind of seen that happen. Trevor Murdoch rolling out there, just a big, tough redneck that's, formerly a WWE superstar. It's these guys that haven't quite given up yet that are still out there.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll say this too. I mean, like I said earlier, a lot of this is going to tie back into nostalgia for me and my childhood. But like, to me, that's a lost art in wrestling federations, because you look back on when I first started watching wrestling in WCW, I mean, you had the whole array of characters. You had the cartoony guys. You had the guys with face paint. You had the crazy loose screw guys like Mick Foley, Cactus Jack back in the day. You had the Cowboys. And all of these guys were in the same organization, and they were chasing after the same top prize. And it wasn't unbelievable. And I feel like now we've been conditioned to think that that's random and weird and should be unbelievable, but that makes sense. I mean, you've got, you talk about the island of misfit toys. I mean, to me, it's just, a nice, healthy, like spread of talent, of characters, of people that can really hit home for everyone. And that's the thing is like, I mentioned this in one of my videos, but I definitely have a preference for the kind of wrestler I like, but that doesn't mean I don't mind the other guys. And I think I need that contrast to really make, because I mean, if you've got an organization full of Trevor Murdochs and these bigger guys and Tim Storm, if everyone looked like Tim Storm and those guys, like, it'd be super boring. You got to have some juxtaposition there of these guys like Colt Cabana. And like this match, I don't know if you're going to get into the details of this match, but one of my favorite parts that I laugh at so much came from this match, and it was Sauronaro, coincidentally, because I mean, we talk about being cartoony. I mean, he got knocked down and he got back up, and he literally just looked at Colt Cabana and said, "Why I oughta." It was such a cartoon in real life moment for me that, I mean, I laughed out loud, and I thought, oh, this is so, like, this is what's missing in wrestling. Being able to have a "why I oughta" cartoon moment. I can almost hear the sound effects in my head, the boing, it's cartoon Roadrunner sound effects. To go from a moment like that to eventually, something as intense as, Nick Aldis and Tim Storm. I know that was the episode before, but to have all of this happening in the same, promotion was just, that's cool to me. And that keeps me invested, because I know there's something for everyone. There's something for me. And so that's my spiel about why variety in wrestling is good.
So you're okay with comedy wrestling and that sort of thing too, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously there's a limit to it. I mean, if it gets so ridiculous that, it's, I don't know, offensive, or, obviously anything that belittles or demeans, a certain type of person or something like that, to me, I'm not okay with. But the cartoony kind of stuff, like I'm totally fine with that, as long as, and I mean, it wasn't, it was definitely prevalent throughout the whole match, but it wasn't the main idea of the match. I mean, these guys are legit performers. They didn't just go out there and run around doing this for 5 minutes and then one of them fell over. Like, they had a legit wrestling match. So as long as you can do that in there tastefully, I like it.
Yeah, I'm always with that with like Colt Cabana. Recently, the NWA on Tuesday night, during this quarantine, they've been reposting a lot of stuff from the 10 Pounds of Gold series and that sort of thing. They revisited the feud between you're going to get there, I think. I don't think it's happened yet. No, because anyway, sorry. I'm trying to place where you're at on everything, but Colt is going to show up early on in the 10 Pounds of Gold series, and he has a feud with Nick Aldis, and Colt is actually a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. And people, like, when I was hanging out in the live chat on Tuesday night where they were revisiting some of this, they went into China, and this was the first time that a championship had been defended in China, apparently. And people were like, hey, Colt's a comedy guy, though. Like, why? Blah, blah, blah. And, but Colt's good, man. Like, Colt's legitimately a good wrestler. Like, he is. He does do what he can do. And I was trying to say to these people in the chat, as much as you could try to convince anybody on the internet, but that, Colt is a guy that in WWE would have just been a jobber, and was for like a brief period of his time, but he found something he's good at and went off and did it. And that's another dude with the hustle. In fact, he is probably, arguably the most successful, or one of the most successful independent wrestlers ever. Like, this guy, people know who Colt Cabana is. And he, until just recently, is not even like with major companies. And he, for what it's worth, I think one of the big things he did back in the day was the Wrestling Road Diaries. Yep. And he did wrestling podcasts before wrestling podcasts were a thing. But on the Wrestling Road Diaries, those were done with Daniel Bryan and Sal Rinauro was on there.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back. You could. I didn't know Sal was on there. I'm into it.
Yeah, if you go back, he still sells those DVDs at his table for merch and stuff. But yeah, Sal is in there. Like, he is one of their friends, and so that moment you mentioned, I'm sure that there's just like this chemistry they just have because they've known each other for a very long time. And anyway, but Colt Cabana and Mr. Anderson beat the hell out of Sal Rinauro, and Jordan Kingsley was the other poor gentleman's name.
Yeah, here's the only other thing I'll say about the I just had this thought about the cartoonish stuff. I think wrestling, like any other form of entertainment, I mean, it's escapism for us, right? It's an escape from real life, and you don't want it all to be so tense that your real life is less stressful. So you want to have those like moments of escape. So I think for me, that's really the value in a Colt Cabana or a Why I Oughta moment, because it just really gave me a break. I mean, I'm sitting here watching this from quarantine 2020, and it was just a great laugh. I mean, everybody needs that, so I think that's a problem with mainstream wrestling right now, is that it just takes itself too seriously to an extent. And when it tries not to, it doesn't know how to be funny. It's almost like, the awkward person who, you know, they want to be funny, but they just don't know how. But like NWA and these guys who have been doing this for so many years, they know how to be funny. They know how to entertain a crowd because they haven't been doing this for massive TV audiences and doing scripted stuff. They've been doing this on their own. And to your point earlier about the crowd, I mean, the crowd's going to let you know what works and what doesn't. So if they're still doing it, obviously it's something that's worked at some point. And so it's kind of a proven method. So I just, you know, not to beat a dead horse about that, but I think it's valuable.
No, I think you're 100% right. And, you know, we appreciate everybody sticking with us. And sorry, this is a long episode. So I know we're going through two whole episodes here, but no, you make an excellent point. I just said that to preface so I could say that Mr. Stinson, who's in the chat right now, he this topic you're talking about is something I've wrestled with constantly, because sometimes I want to be like, oh, I hate comedy wrestling, and sometimes I'm like, nah, it's fun. And there's a character that's going to show up later in the NWA that is very much like kind of a comedic character that people love, and he has a following. And Mr. Stinson and his whole family showed up dressed as these characters. And it wasn't until I saw them live at the event with he and his wife and his two daughters, like very young daughters, like all dressed up, like celebrating these characters, that I was like, all right. Like, I get it. You know, I get it. I can go back to when I loved the Bushwhackers or like whoever else, you know, like it's fine. It's fine. You just got to accept these things. Speaking of weird and funny, though, the next thing that happens, well, first of all, you get a little segment with Aldous in the parking lot complaining about the questions. So you get a little teaser there. And but then you go to this is Tony Falk. I taught Shawn Michaels how to speak Kizardi. He became fond of two things, waffles and tire irons. So I opened my own store, Tony Falk's Waffles and Tire Irons.
He paints them gold, man. He paints them gold. And I wonder if it's the same gold as those tag belts, because man, I'd get a tire iron that it was that gold.
That is fantastic. Yeah, that's an excellent point. You also get to see an Eddie Kingston promo again on the wild cards. He says he's backstage with Kyle. This is the part you were talking about. It's so cool to me to talk to you watching these for the first time, because you reference things that like also stood out to me. So I feel like we're just bonding. I watched this Eddie Kingston promo. I swear to God, I watched it like 10, 12 times the first time. Like, I just could not
That's crazy.
Get over.
I watched it multiple times. Also, it was one of the only things that I rewatched as I was going through these, because I was trying to go through them not really fast, but I wanted to like take in as much as I could. But that just something about it, man. Like, I felt his rage in a way that like I don't feel it from a lot of other guys. It's not
like Kyle's trying to approach this as like the standard interview, and like Eddie just busts in with like, let me speak, huh? Let me, you know, like that like.
And the fact that he like got so close into the camera, like that it couldn't even focus on him. And, you know, they didn't say, okay, go redo that because it was out of focus. Like, to me, and I don't know, I don't know the behind the scenes stuff, but I felt like, again, that was real. And they were just like, well, we can't go back and redo it because we just captured the perfect, you know, him being himself. So it's just going to be blurry, and the fans are just going to have to be okay with it. And I just thought that was great. I mean, I felt it. I felt the rage. I was like a little bit nervous. That's why, and that's funny. So I mentioned Kyle. I don't remember his last name, but like, that's why he stood out to me, because I watched that a couple of times and I was just like, oh, poor Kyle. Like, oh man, he was not prepared for that.
Poor Kyle Davis. Kyle Davis is his name, and he's trying to like just take on this job. Like, here's my way in, and I'm gonna interview these guys in the backstage, and Eddie Kingston just freaking lays it out right there, and Eddie Kingston has no time. I mean, he everything he says, like, you just believe him. Like, yep. Eddie Kingston is the most believable dude. Like, he's like the wild cards or the tag team champions. That makes you something. But to me, it's nothing. And, you know, you got nothing for me. Like, Homicide's a man I'd die for. And you aren't anything until you beat the God Homicide or the King of New York or whatever he says. Like, Eddie Kingston, like, just lays into it. Like, he's authentic. Again, that word authentic. Like, Eddie Kingston, he seems like he's just that dude. Like, he gets passionate about something, he's on it, and he will fight you for it. And I love that about Eddie Kingston.
And I mean, keep in mind, we're seeing this fresh off the heels of the cartoon match and a Nick Aldis TMZ like kind of funny, not funny, but you know, off the wall kind of spot. So I think, you know, it was no accident where it was positioned to have that kind of effect.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do like you mentioned that a lot, because I don't think that's something that I've had come up in conversation before. Just the balancing act they're playing with, like, the comedy stuff and then going into the very serious stuff. Also, now in episode 2, we get our first glimpse of the women's division in NWA Power. We jump right into Ashley Vox versus Allison Kay, the NWA Women's World Champion. And they have a nice little match there. Ashley, of course, falling prey to Allison Kay. And she goes right for. They ask her, they're like, well, you handpicked this opponent. Why did you pick this opponent? And Kay says, this is a new era. This is the NWA. We're hungry. And she invites Ashley over to stand with her and says, you did good, kid. Your good wasn't good enough, but I'm happy you're here on this roster. Your future's bright, just not with my title. Not right now. Kay declares that the NWA women's division is going to be in good hands. What'd you think about your first clips of the NWA women's division?
It was interesting, man. I particularly like the reverse pile driver, or whatever the finisher was there. I thought that was really cool. I don't see that a lot, especially in women's division wrestling. So I thought that was pretty intense. I love the post-match promo. I thought that that kind of sportsmanship, even in a heelish way, is really valuable in the NWA because it's unique to the NWA. You don't see that anywhere else. You don't see the heel getting on the mic and saying, hey, you know, I beat you, but, you know, you put up a hell of a fight. Like, you don't see that. And so that's another thing that makes it feel more real. I don't feel like I have to like that person after that necessarily, but and then I also like, I don't think we've mentioned this yet, but, you know, they were very specific. This was a non-title match. And I like that because subconsciously it puts an idea in my head that the champion may not win, because for them to put that stipulation on, it's just like a subconscious thing that makes me give the challenger a little more not credibility, but like I start to believe maybe the champion's not going to win, because why else would they say that if she's just going to, you know, because I mean, we're all adults here. We know this is scripted. It's the ending is decided, but like, you know, I just love that touch because it's just another kind of subconscious like thing that they plant in my mind. It's like, oh, this is a non-title match. And so at various points during the match, you know, as Ashley Vox is getting in some really good offense, I'm like, whoa, she might come out with the win here. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, no, I was literally like, as you're saying that, I was like, oh my God, that's another great point. You know, what it makes me think of is that in WWE, like growing up watching it, I typically took that as the opponent, the challenger is going to win.
Yep.
Because it sets up the pay-per-view match or whatever, you know, like it's just that easy. But these are things, and I'll say this, and this is not from me initially, but I love wrestling podcasts. And so like listening to guys like JR, and then I'll listen to even sometimes The Observer with Dave Meltzer, or like Wade Keller at Pro Wrestling Torch, and they'll talk about past wrestling and like tactics they use that somehow got lost along the way. And This is a perfect example of one of them is these like non-title matches. Another example being time limits. And it's something that AEW has put into practice, I will say, but NWA is going to be using that too. And technically before AEW got started. So you'll see like that kind of thing in play. Like Jim Ross used to talk about it all the time on his podcast. I remember just like, why are there not time limits? Yeah. Like that gives you like one extra element of like something to worry about. Like, it's just like, you got to beat this guy. Well, you have to beat him.
Yeah. And it's like, I know that we're in, the reality era or whatever, where, we understand how the business works, and we understand, as I said, that it's scripted and there's a creative process at work. But like, why just throw all that out when that was something that really helped contribute to that feeling of authenticity? Like, are you going to go through a movie script and throw out half the script because, oh, these people know it's a movie? Like, no, you're going to keep it in there because it's part of the story. And so part of the story is this match can only go as long as TV time has for it, because this is a TV show. So, to me, that's almost more real to acknowledge that, like, hey, we're filming a TV show. We got 20 minutes left. This is a 20-minute match. Go at it,
Yeah, no, perfect. I mean, they're all like little details that like, it just, I don't know, man, it all faded away. But yeah, this is the perfect example. Allison Kay, like fighting with a non-title match. Allison Kay, of course, still gets the win. And yeah, Allison Kay, props to her. She is another wrestler that has been all over the place. Like she's traveled through so many women's divisions. She's been over in Japan. She's come over here and done TNA, Impact, all of that stuff. But she's finally found a good spot. All right, what's next for us? We see Kyle Davis try to get a word from Tim Storm. Storm says he can't respond. We'll talk to him next week, he says. Galley introduces James Storm. Storm whips the mic from him and threatens to smack him. James says he doesn't get announced as champ. He's James Storm. To him, the title he has is the national championship, but it's also a prop, a fast lane to get him where he belongs, which is the 10 pounds of gold. And now that Tim Storm is out of the way, that leaves James Storm. He says that unlike a lot of those little boys, by the way, you would not have this in WWE because I feel like Vince would just be so against you having so many people named Storm. Like it would just be like, people can't wrap their brains around that, pal. Like you can't do that.
You're now called the James Experiment.
Exactly. James Storm says, unlike a lot of these little boys out here, he's a grown-ass man. He's James Mother effing Storm. He says he starts to give his catchphrase. I think he's sorry about your damn luck. But Eli Drake emerges and says he's not dressed to fight. And clearly James is dressed to go to a Stagecoach festival or something. Drake tells him not to minimize what he's done. Carrying that title is a big deal. It's a big deal because it means he is first in line. That national title means you are the number one contender. And says maybe Aldis is ducking James Storm. Maybe Aldis is ducking Eli Drake. But he says, you are the man next in line. Don't waste this time. Make the move. Take the shot. But after you do, make sure you remember me. Win, lose, or draw. If you pick up that 10 pounds of gold, Eli Drake's your boy. And that's kind of how that segment goes. It's a little convoluted, I think, in this one, I will say. But go ahead, Will. Your thoughts.
This completely, and everything I'm about to say, I mean in a good way, but it melted my brain. And it made me question everything I thought I knew about wrestling. And yeah, that sounds a little dramatic from this promo, but there was something very deep in my brain that was knocked rattled loose during this, and that was this idea that we are now allowed to acknowledge that titles are tiered and that there is a mid-card title and that is a stepping stone to, again, the prestigious world's heavyweight championship. Because again, they're appealing to my sense of reality here in that, yeah, it's great to be the national champion, but you obviously want to be the world's champion. That's the prize, that's the mountaintop. And so at first I was a little bit taken aback that I felt like James Storm was disrespecting, quote unquote, the title. But then again, like I said, like my brain just, as it processed it, it was like, oh, whoa, this is how it should be, because it is a stepping stone. I'm not taking away any prestige or anything from that national title, but guys, we can all admit it's not the world's title. It doesn't have the same reverence as you guys talked about in the chat. It doesn't have the same, mystique and aura about it that the 10 pounds of gold has. So why would we sit here like we often do in other promotions and try to act like all these titles are somehow all like little islands and they're all special in their own right? I mean, I think it was most recently AJ Styles was the US champion in WWE, and he literally tried to come out and talk about the fact that the US championship, the US title, was now the title in the WWE because he had it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you're never going to convince me of that. Like, you're never going to convince me that it's the same as the world title. It's the same situation here, but the NWA is just choosing to acknowledge it. And I appreciated that at the end of the day.
Well, it's this weird thing of like, I remember, I mean, even as a WWE fan, I mean, one of the big things always was, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but I definitely got this sense back when, God, when I was coming up, like when it was like Ultimate Warrior or like Ravishing Rick Rude or Mr. Perfect or whoever else, it was like the Intercontinental title was cool as hell, man. Like I loved the Intercontinental title because it was like, I think I've heard Stone Cold on his podcast call it was like, that's the workers belt, aside from probably Ultimate Warrior, but like, it's like, that's the workers belt. Like those are the guys, like they're busting their ass day in, day out. Like they carry everything, and that's fine. You can appreciate that. But the Intercontinental title felt like it was important because once you got that meant you were like that step closer. Now you were main event. Now you were like walking into that new territory, like a lot of people fought for the Intercontinental title, but if you got it, you were taking a step up. And that's what the national title should feel like to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I am 100% with you. The Intercontinental, the actual belt is probably my favorite WWE belt of all time. Just the way it looks and the fact that all of those people that you just named, I picture them when I think of that belt. And I've heard that as well, that it was the workers belt, the person who was the best in-ring, performer at the time, but it was a stepping stone. And you look at most of these guys, like Stone Cold came up through there. I think The Rock, guys like that came down that path from Intercontinental to eventually being big stars as world champions. But think about the guys that didn't, and how much more real would it be, for Mr. Perfect to come out and acknowledge like, hey, I'm the Intercontinental champion, but I'm ready to be the star. I'm ready to be the guy, not just a guy with the workers belt, And so I just again, like I thought that was really cool that they just full on episode 1, they're just going to acknowledge that and not see it as degrading one of their championships.
I totally agree with you. I don't think I even put it into that perspective at the time, but you're 100% right. Just like I was even making the comment about the names. This is another big deal. I don't think that that's something you're expecting in wrestling today, that they acknowledge like this is the level up. Like this is the mushroom in Mario. Like this is like you're growing now. Like you're you're up into this next level now. And so Eli Drake's like, all right, well, don't diminish this title just because you want the 10 pounds so much. This is your ticket, buddy. You get there. And I support you. But remember your boy when you get up there. That's an interesting concept. All right, let's move on into the next part. The tag team championships. The wild cards defend against Eddie Kingston and the Homicide. Nice little match here. But this one ends in it's the first kerfluffle match, I will say, that we've seen on NWA Power. You get a Dawson's hit the ring and they give a low blow to Kingston. Homicide's tossed into the steps. Anyway, it's a DQ. The Dawsons end up brutalizing both teams, I think, in this one. And they clear the ring, stand tall, and they're looking at the cameras like, is everybody watching this? Will, do you have any thoughts on that tag team competition there?
They were after their lunch money, man. You go after all four of them.
Those damn Dawsons. Let me tell you something, Will. Those guys are intimidating, seeing them in person, because I have a big mouth and I was yelling and I would always be like, we hate you. You damn Dawsons. We hate you. And they'd be like, we are going to kill you.
Yeah.
Like they're very intimidating.
Yeah. No, I mean, my thoughts from this match were, there was one subtle thing I remember that I did appreciate, and I think it was Royce Isaacs rolling Homicide away from the ropes before he attempted a pin. That was just another thing. I feel like I don't see it like that awareness that I think he had him down, but he was right beside the ropes, and so he kind of pulled him back and rolled him over a couple times and then tried to pin him. I was just like, duh, like it's brilliant, you know. But those guys are all incredible athletes in the ring, so the match itself was really nonstop action. I'm not a big fan of run-ins, not because I'm opposed to them. They're just overdone the past 4 years in WWE, and so I've come to expect them almost. So it was the first one that I had seen, and I personally don't feel like it was wasted. I feel like a storyline was furthered. It wasn't, again, when I see WWE and these other organizations using this, it's usually because they don't want to have to declare a winner or they want to save something for the pay-per-view. I didn't sense that in this moment. I kind of sense that it's furthering a bigger and better storyline. So, ultimately I was okay with it.
It's cool to see you already have that opinion about it, because I know how hard it must be. Coming from WWE, it makes perfect sense that in WWE you're so ingrained with these ideas, and one of them being that run-ins are just going to be part of it. Like if they announce some big match for Monday Night Raw, something stupid is going to happen. To hear you say that still you're giving faith to the NWA that if they do a thing like a run-in, they obviously have some further plan for what that means. They're thinking outside of that week. WWE definitely, dude. I mean, the last times I've watched it still seemed like it was the same old. They just feel like they've got to make a match, and then they're like, oh dude, we made this match, and now the pay-per-view we're thinking of this thing. How do we get out of that? And so that
I mean, for me it's all about trust, man. I have, and again, just one last plug for my YouTube channel, but go watch those first two videos, and specifically this last one where I get into 10 pounds of gold, and you'll see exactly why I went from not really knowing anything about NWA to almost fully trusting them just through the first 10 episodes of 10 pounds of gold, because I believe in my heart that these guys know pro wrestling, that the talent that they have are authentic pro wrestlers, and that the people that are doing the booking and making the decisions from Billy Corgan all the way down are educated and experienced, knowledgeable. I trust them. And so when you have that kind of trust, in organization, even after the limited experience I have with them, you can look at stuff like that in a different light. You know, the other side of the coin, there's the WWE, who has squandered every ounce of my trust over the past few years, and I'm not even going to begin to list out why. But you know, when a run-in happens on WWE, I assume the worst. But you know, the NWA has proven to me that they're trustworthy, and because of that, these things can be used and can actually benefit, you know, the bigger story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Will, we're just going to go ahead and jump into the next part of this, just so to wrap up the recap portion of this. We get to sit down with Gally and Aldis and Camille. I'm just going to read what this guy says. He says, Gally asks what's going through his mind after this defeat of Tim Storm. Aldis says it's no secret that when you are the world champion, you get to hold a little power and have a little say. And he says that if he's going to be the real world's champion, let's put all the pressure on episode 1 and make it happen. I don't know if this makes any sense to me. He says he feels like he's been in a car wreck. Everything he says about Storm is true. He is a real man. Says Tim is obviously not necessarily at his peak, but there's a lot to be said about what he brings to the table. If it's his last chance he gets, he can hold his head high. Gally asks why he needs Camille at ringside for him. Aldis starts to get upset, asking who he thinks he is. Aldis reminds us of what happened at All In, where he lost the world championship to an inferior athlete because of an outside interference and a crooked referee. He decided to even the odds with an insurance policy, and it just so happened to work out perfectly. Says when people are gunning for you, you could use that insurance. Points out that aside from neutralizing the likes of Brandy Rhodes, she has never helped him illegally win a match, and Aldis even prevented her from interfering with his match with Marty Scurll. Spoiler alert, Will. Says that she does her job better than anyone. Gally turns to Camille and says, well, then what's in it for you to be his insurance policy? She does not respond. Joe says, the whole world wants to hear your thoughts. Now is your opportunity on NWA Power. Do you have anything to say for your fans who want to support you? Nothing. Aldis menaces. He doesn't want to hear another word about not letting her speak. They make their leave, and that wraps the show. Any thoughts here, Will?
This is great because this is literally as far as I've gotten. I've watched the first 2 episodes, so this is where I'm at. So I don't know what happens in episode 3. Again, I'm trusting that it is going to turn into a bigger storyline. I also do know, just because I follow you on Twitter and various other people, that, you know, Camille, I think recently debuted in the ring for NWA, correct? So
that is correct. Yes.
So, you know, don't worry about spoiling that for me. But so I know that as a character, she's going to progress, which that obviously gives me hope for where this is going. But you know, I'm torn about the fact that this would end the show. I almost, you know, again, if I was booking it, which I'm not qualified to. I don't have that job, but I may have put it at a different point in the show. But then what do you end the show with? I mean, again, he's not wrestling on the show, but you're still ending the show with the champion at the center. So there is some psychological positives that come with doing that, even though it wasn't like a big exciting finish or a match or anything like that. So, you know, it is what it is at this point, and I'm not any less invested in it because of it. I'm just really now anxious to watch episode 3, and I don't have to wait a week. I can literally just watch it when we're done here. So
yeah, you can. I mean, I would say this about it. I mean, one thing that's cool about it, as far as the main event wrestling match you got, was the tag team match, and I think that's cool. I agree with you. Yeah, they did end on this like soap opera thing. And if you listen to Lagana a little bit, like he felt like the Camille thing was taking off a little bit better than they expected. The crowd also influenced that, so they decided to develop that a little bit more. But you know, man, we've been doing this thing on the Twitter. I don't know if you've seen it, but like on the This Is the NWA Twitter, we do these cast broadcasts, and I'll say this here, but like, it's probably not cool with everybody, but like, I'll tell you, go to the network and pull up an old NWA pay-per-view, and I'll broadcast it on cast, and we have a chat room just like we have here right now. By the way, thank you everybody for being here. I'll broadcast a old NWA pay-per-view, and you could have a chat room and chat it out and stuff like that. It's amazing to me in the old NWA pay-per-views that we've watched so far, how many matches are tag matches. Like, it's insane. Like, tag matches were where it was at. Like in the 80s, like, I mean, in Starrcade 88, literally 2/3 of the pay-per-view were like tag team matches. Like, it was just all tag matches. It was incredible. But so anyway, it was cool to me in an era where tag matches, like Vince, it felt like for a while, I'm not going to shy away from talking about them. Like, WWE annoyed the hell out of me. Like, I hated them after not this last WrestleMania, but the WrestleMania before, when I felt like they just didn't trust Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey to just main event a pay-per-view. And they were like, oh, we'll do all this other stuff, and then we'll throw in Charlotte, and then we'll, it just, anyway. Long story short, to me, like, he had killed tag team wrestling. He tried. And now, like, to see like a place like this be like, well, your main event match is the tag team title match. That's the one we're going to push. That's cool to me. Like, make those titles matter. And every TV show doesn't have to have, like, the world champion doesn't have to wrestle on every show. Right. The world champion wrestles when it's important. You know, that's kind of how I feel about what the NWA is doing. Like, it's like, you may see Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis does not have to step in the ring every week. Like, that's, Nick Aldis wrestles because Nick Aldis matters. And we can also address our chat room here too. We got a lot of stuff going on there. But Will, any final thoughts about episode 2 there?
Not about the episode itself, but I wholeheartedly agree with you. I am a tag team fan. I could, if you had a pay-per-view and you said this is going to be all tag team matches, I'd still watch it every second of it, because to me, that is what I grew up with. And there's I don't understand. I do understand. I understand the mentality behind wanting to push singles matches and things like that, and obviously singles titles and the world title. But to me, tag team wrestling is foundational to professional wrestling. You can't, those can't exist separately. And somebody said in the chat a few minutes ago, make sure to differentiate between sports entertainment and professional wrestling. That's exactly the point. That in sports entertainment, tag team wrestling doesn't make much sense because you don't have the hero standing alone at the end with the belt. You've got a team, which it's not, so I think that's the difference. In professional wrestling, tag team wrestling is prominent. It can be front and center. It can main event a pay-per-view. It can, as you said, be 50 to 60% of a pay-per-view's matches and still be interesting because these guys know how to work together. They know how to perform. And I could sit here and talk about tag teams all day. Maybe we should schedule a chat where we just talk about tag teams, because I could.
Well, I was just literally having the same idea, Will. I see WWE front row in the chat saying that seeing the formation of the wild cards at the Crockett Cup and how they've gelled on Power has been really special. I 100% agree with that. I was there at the Crockett Cup in Concord, North Carolina, and I'm with Will. I love tag team wrestling. I also apparently these don't sell tickets as much or get ratings, but I love tournaments. So I love tournaments and I love tag team wrestling. Crockett Cup is literally the perfect pay-per-view to me. Like I think it's amazing. Just a tag team tournament to win a cup. Like, who are the best tag teams? Anybody from anywhere, come along, bring your tag team. Let's see if you're that good. So the wild cards, I met them there and was stunned. I met them before the pay-per-view, and then to see how well they performed in the pay-per-view, it was quite the feat. So I think Will and I should review the Crockett Cup at some point, because
I would love that. Hey, who's your favorite tag team of all time? Not to put you on the spot.
Oh man. Well, here's the thing. No, this is a good question. I don't know. I mean, the tag team that people call BS on this, but Heart Foundation got me into tag team wrestling. Heart Foundation was like initially my favorite tag team of all time. Nowadays, I don't know. I mean, they'd still be up there. But I did watch Starrcade 88, and the original Midnight Express fought the new Midnight Express. Bobby Eaton and Sweet Stan Lane, they're pretty freaking awesome. They really are. It's no joke. Like, those guys are good. I don't know. I've loved a lot of tag teams in my day, Will. That's a tough question.
It's a tough one. I don't know if I have an answer. As soon as I asked that, I was like, oh God, if he asked me, I don't know.
I don't know. There's been days I've been excited about the Road Warriors. Like, there's been days like, I mean, Midnight Express, the Road Warriors, dude, you're coming up on some good stuff at NWA Power. The Rock and Roll Express, who have been around for forever, are still fun as hell to watch. Like, they're good, man.
For me, Ole and Arn Anderson. I mean, Arn Anderson's my all-time fave, and he was so versatile, as a singles competitor and a tag team. So they'll always have a special place in my heart.
Let's have them in the live chat too, by the way. We're through the recap. So, but yeah, go ahead, Will. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say.
Yeah. Let us know you guys' favorite tag teams. I'd love to hear. Are they? Yeah, Midnight's Fabulous Freebirds. I mean, the Steiner brothers. Like, stuff. I mean, that was like the heyday of wrestling for me when I was a kid, and like tag team wrestling was front and center for that. So I can't forsake that. I can't. That's, as I said, foundational for me.
Speaking of the Steiners, just real quick, on Starrcade 88, one of the matches was for the television title. Rick Steiner defeated Mike Rotunda. People, a lot of newer people would probably know him as IRS, the father of Bray Wyatt. That crowd exploded during that match, and I hear old timers talk about like the way crowds were, and you don't believe it, but go back and watch Starrcade 88, man. That was some legit stuff. That crowd was into that match. And when Rick Steiner won that television title, that was a big deal. It was pretty impressive. I've always been an Arn fan, by the way, because he always reminded me of my uncle. So you're talking about Arn. I will say, like, I'm with you on Arn. I have always thought he was a badass, and he just had the I think it's safe to say we're in safe company here to say that he had the more legit physique. Like, he was not like the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
He didn't he was not Kerry Von Erich. He was not whoever else. It was just a tough SOB. Like, he just looked awesome, and he could wrestle, and that spine buster would freaking kill you. You knew you were dead if you took that spine buster. I loved Arn Anderson.
Yep. So good, man. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole of Arn Anderson matches when I was doing the research for the videos I've been making. So that was fun for me.
Yeah, I saw you mention Arn Anderson in there. What was cool to me is like literally in like Starrcade. I keep referencing Starrcade '88, but we just watched it last weekend on the cast stream for the This Is the NWA. But it was like the Road Warriors versus Dusty and Sting. And it was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just watching it. I didn't know what was coming. I just threw it on, and I was like, I did like a Google search for like great pay-per-views, and it was Starrcade '88 came up, and I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's throw a Starrcade '88. Lots of people showed up, and it was like I saw that match happening, and I was like, what is this match? Like these people, like all of these people in one ring, like they're fighting each other. This is insane.
Yeah,
It's just.
I pulled up an old WWF pay-per-view. I don't remember which one it was, but back, when they were good. And it was like, it was a 6-man tag match, and it was like the Road Warriors and, man, I can't remember the other babyface, their third, but against like the Nasty Boys and Big Boss Man. And I was just like, it started off the pay-per-view and it went for like 35 minutes. And I was like, this is great. Why don't they do this anymore? There's no storyline here. They just put some people in a match, and they knew they'd put on a good match, and they did,
Yeah, 100% agree. WWE Front Run, the Chad has mentioned it. I came into wrestling later, but Edge and Christian, Dudley's, Hardys set the tag team scene on fire during the Attitude Era. Legit main event matches. You are not wrong about that. Like those guys were legit main event matches. They were in a period where I think that Vince was still at that same point of like, he wasn't even sure about tag teams anymore. I think that those teams on their own made tag team wrestling not die. Like they kept it alive. Like just them. There was this period during the 90s, like when I was watching, that it was like those three teams, Edge and Christian, Dudley's, Hardys. You had the APA. God, who else? There was a lot of teams during that time. It was a heyday kind of for the tag teams during the 90s for a little bit. But yeah, man, I feel like he didn't know what to do with a lot of those people, but like it was just like the Hardys were jobbers. Like they started off as jobbers, and Edge and Christian, I feel like they just kind of they had an idea for Edge, and then they just kind of farted it out and then didn't do anything. And then they just threw him in with Christian, and the Dudleys came over from ECW. And then all of a sudden these three teams are having the best matches in wrestling.
Yeah, I personally think that, Stone Cold and The Rock and those guys that came out of the Attitude Era, it's getting late. They kind of, I don't think they soured Vince on tag teams, but I think that they pushed this idea to the forefront that only these big star singles guys could be the stars, and I think that Vince may have tried to focus more on that for that reason. So I don't know. I'm done trying to figure out how Vince McMahon thinks, because I don't think he thinks like any of us. So
Vince McMahon, I don't think anybody could ever predict how that guy thinks. Von Erichs, I'm seeing in the chat now. I'm seeing, I love watching the Freebirds kick the Von Erich tail across Texas. Robert Stinson, you seem like you are a troublemaker. Like you just seem like you're just trying to cause problems. This day in history, like, wasn't it yesterday that Kerry Von Erich won the NWA, the 10 pounds of gold, the world's heavyweight championship from Ric Flair? I think it was yesterday.
Nice.
The Von Erichs, like the nephew or the sons of Kevin Von Erich, are actually in MLW right now, I think, wrestling. So they're the legacy lives on. Well, I don't want to keep you all night, my brother. What else do you want to talk about? Anything else?
No, man, let's do this again. Let's do it again sometime. Let's we'll keep in touch, and this was fun. I like going live and just having a conversation with another wrestling fan.
I'm legitimately like lost in the conversation, and I just looked and I was like, oh, it's almost midnight. And yeah, I do still have to work on Friday morning. So it's It is what it is, man. No, this is exactly what I love. I miss this, guys. I miss you know, from the old NWA podcast. I love the live stuff. You guys in the chat, like just chiming in. Robert Stitz has got one last point. We're gonna hold for it.
While we're holding from that, I will just, you know, summing up, plug what I got going on, which is if you missed the beginning, I'm documenting my journey into the NWA, just because I needed an outlet because I'm so excited about it, because I'm having so much fun. So if you go to my YouTube channel, I've got a couple videos on there, and there'll be more to come. But follow me on Twitter, because I'll tell you this, for me, and I think Gary and I have talked about this before, but for me, wrestling is almost more about the community than it is the product. I love being a part of community like this. That's why these conversations go on and on, because I love talking about it. So any of you guys out there,
and this is how Will and I fell in love.
Yes, in the beard, our beards, they touched, and
our beards, yeah.
But yeah, go follow me, send me matches that I need to watch, you know, follow along as I kind of react to stuff, because I just want to connect with you guys and just become part of, you know, the NWA fam, because that's what makes it for me. You know, I don't live in a bubble. I want to be kind of a part of the community. So I'm excited.
Oh, now Joe Lubin shows up, says, we're done with our show. Time to support Gary. Thank you so much for being here. You know, Will is a good dude. I actually do know Will. I'll be honest, but no, he's legitimately jumping in on this NWA train, man. Hashtag NWA fam. We're trying to make that a thing. You guys in the chat, make that a thing.
I thought it was already
let's do this. Well, it sort of was, but it just recently, like Mr. Stinson out there and and people were talking about, like, let's make it like a real thing. Like, I'm with Will. All I've ever cared about is the community part of it. That's all I ever wanted to start this podcast for in the first place. Was I just liked wrestling. This was a cool wrestling thing that was happening. Here's an outlet for me. Let's do this. And so it's been cool to see so many people join in, and so many people, by the way, that were out of wrestling, not just people that are slowly finding wrestling for the first time, or people that just stumble on to NWA from AEW or WWE. It's like a lot of people that were into wrestling, and then something happened along the way that they were like, I'm done with wrestling. I guess I just don't have that anymore. And then NWA happens and they're back. And that's a really, really cool thing. I guess I should acknowledge money out to Anus. Like old school tag teams like Demolition, L&D, Road Warriors, Blade Runners, Orient Express, Strike Force. I don't believe you that you like the Blade Runners. Nobody liked the Blade Runners. I don't know anybody that knew the Blade Runners. And for anybody who doesn't know, that was like Sting and Ultimate Warrior when they were a tag team back in the day. So
I like the Blade Runners. I love the Blade. I've got a Blade Runner right here.
Yeah, well, you have a Blade Runner, but I don't know that anybody.
It's a Blade Runner with face paint on.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody who knew who the Blade Runners were or cared beforehand. No, NWA fam. Hey, listen, me and Will, a lot of you in the chat right now are going to appreciate the project that Will and I are working on right now. That's going to start hopefully soon, and it's all waiting on me because Will is clearly ready to go. So I am trying to work on there. He's just sitting there waiting. It's going to be good. You guys are going to dig it, and it's going to involve a lot of questions like what we're talking about today when we got into tag teams and that thing. Tomorrow night, I'm actually doing a live stream again. I'm going to do another live stream for NWA Power episode 3. I'm going to be talking with a young lady named Madeline Hoptree. And you guys are going to dig her. She's awesome. She's fun. She's a bartender downtown where I live. And she's a cool chick. She's real fun to talk to. But she also loved wrestling when she was a kid and hasn't watched wrestling since. And she has started watching wrestling because of NWA Power. And she's jumped in, and she is through episode 3 now. And tomorrow night, we're going to try to go live and talk with Madeline about what she thinks about episode 3. I think episode 4 on Saturday night, if you're listening, Robert Simpson in the chat. I think he's going to join me for episode 4. And we'll keep it going. We'll keep it planning. We're just trying to do a quarantine stream binge watch of NWA Power. We're just trying to catch up. On Tuesday night next week, if you guys aren't aware, Superpower airs. Will, I don't know what you're going to do, buddy.
I have I'm so torn because I have heard about this, and I'm just like, oh man, how many episodes are there at this point?
There's 20 episodes of Power, so you would have to.
I got this.
You got it.
You said Tuesday? I'm good.
Yeah. So on Tuesday, Superpower airs, which is the unaired episode of NWA Power, like the extended edition of NWA Power that they have previously recorded that they just decided not to air once the whole COVID thing hit. And they've decided they're going to air it on Tuesday night. It features a Tim Storm versus Jack Stane match, if I'm not mistaken. Wow. You'll see a matchup with Nick Aldis and Royce Isaacs versus Marty Scurll and Brody Lee. No, not Brody Lee. Somebody help me out. I just forgot. I'm terrible. Ring of Honor talent though. It's gonna be awesome. Robert Simpson says, "You got this, brother." This will be episode number 21. So you just got to work your way up to that before Tuesday. And we could grab Robert Stinson, hop on the Zoom, and do a Superpower recap. That's what we could. Will has accepted the challenge. Robert Stinson, I hope you're ready. We can do that. So Superpower is airing on Tuesday night at 6:05-ish. Brody King, thank you. WWE Front Row. I was stalling until somebody freaking told me who the hell that was. And
I wasn't. Yeah, I've never seen it.
Yeah. Well, Brody King, Marty Scurll versus Nick Aldis and Royce Isaacs. You get Tim Storm versus Jack Stane. A rematch from Will. You said all you knew about Tim Storm was he won the NWA title from Jack Stane. So imagine there's some bad blood there.
2016. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, you guys, tune in. Will, where are you at on all the social medias? One more time for all these people.
Right here. Hey, it's Will. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. If you're still using that, that's pretty much my handle everywhere. YouTube, I'm not sure if that's my handle. You might just have to search for Wil Martin, or maybe Gary, you can link to it in the description or something to the project I'm working on right now. But yeah, hit me up. I'd love to hear from all you guys and keep the conversation going.
Oh, Robert Stinson mentioned it's a question mark and Shooter Stevens versus the Rock and Roll Express. Will has no idea about all of that stuff. That's so cool. Superpower is going to be awesome. Will, I hope you do get catched up. That's how late it is.
Time for bed.
All right. This is Gary Horde on all the social medias. This is at the NWA Pod. Please tell everybody about us. Tell them to subscribe to this channel. We just recapped episode number 1 and 2, and we're going to keep it going. Corn Stream, NWA Power Rewind. You guys join us. Thank you so much for everything. We love you guys, and thanks for listening.